Lesson 3-9, Modeling Decimals with Base 10 Blocks. The focus in this lesson is for you to be able to write dollar and cent amounts. You're going to discuss fractional parts of a dollar, and you're going to explore tenths using the base 10 blocks and a square grid. You're going to represent hundredths with base 10 blocks, and I want you to be able to write fractions and decimals for shaded parts of square grids, and to be able to shade grids to represent decimals. But first, let's start with our mental math and fluency. Round 97,555 to the nearest 10,000. Right away, you should underline the 10,000s place. You should draw an arrow from the number to the right of it to the 9. You should look at that and say, the 7 is 5 or more, so that tells me to round the 9 up to a 10. So the 9 would become a 10. Every number after that would become a 0. So the 7 would become a 0, and all the 5s would become a 0. So I actually would be rounding it to 100,000. Let's check our answer and see if we did that correctly. And we did. Again, when you're going to round it to whatever place value it's asking, please make sure that you're underlining it so that you have the right one and you're drawing your arrow. So this time it's telling me, hey, you need to round it to the thousands place. So I underline the thousands place. I draw my arrow from the number to the right of it to that number. That's telling me 5 and up. I round that 7 up to an 8. Every place after that becomes a 0. But don't forget, I can't eliminate this number. I must still write the number before the place I round to down. So I should have rounded the place value to 98,000. And we did it correct again. Our final number is asking us to round it. Sorry, I'm taking a second here. To round it to the hundreds place. You should underline the hundreds place. Again, draw your arrow over to it. 5 and above, we round this up to 6. Every number after that becomes a 0. Again, we can't forget our first numbers though. We must bring them down also. So if we would have rounded to the hundreds place, we should be at 97,600. Excuse me. Exploring tenths with base 10 blocks. Write the following amounts using a dollar sign and a decimal point. So let's take a look at this. It says $3 bills, 5 dimes, and 1 penny. So how much total would we have if we had $3 bills? Well, that would be $3. 5 dimes would be 50 cents. And 1 penny would be just 1 cent. So I would write it $3 and 51 cents. Don't forget to draw your dollar sign. 3 dimes, well that's 30 cents, which we write it as 0.30. And 5 dimes should have been written as 0.50. $3 would be written as 3.00. And 6 pennies. 6 pennies, so 6 cents out of a dollar would be written 0.06. So the dimes is in the tenths place, and the pennies is in the hundredths place, because it takes 100 pennies to make a dollar. So how would I write that? I would have a total of 36 cents, or 0.36. $2 bills and 7 dimes, well, that would be $2, which we would write 2.2 .00, and 7 dimes would be 70 cents, which is .70. When it says and, I should be adding. So notice every time here, that's what we did. We added the $3 plus the 50 cents plus the penny, which again should be written .01, and came up with the 351. 3 dimes plus 6 cents, 36 cents. We could write that as a dollar sign, or we could have wrote a cent sign afterward. $2 bills and 7 dimes is a total of $2.70. And 9 pennies. Well, remember the 9 pennies, 9 goes in the hundredth spot. So how would we write that again? .09. It's important when working with decimals that you line them up accurately. If I was going to have to write this out to add these up, I would make sure I put $3. This is the ones place. This is the tenths place. This is a hundredths place. Then when I added the 50 cents, I would put .50, and then I would have put .01. Look at how accurately and precisely I'm lining those up so that when I would add them, 0 plus 0 plus 1 is 1. 0 plus 5 plus 0 is 5. Look at, I'm bringing my decimal point down to make sure it's in the right spot. And then 3 plus nothing is 3. That's how I make sure I add my decimals. So when working with bills, decimal points, dimes, pennies, quarters, I always have to make sure that I am aligning those decimal points up when I'm adding. So complete the math message on Math Masters, page 125. If you do not have that, I want you to come back to me and I want you to get it from me. And basically, that's just doing exactly what I just did with you previously. So if you don't remember or can't do it from what I've just shown you, you're going to have to rewind this recording and play it again. So pause the tape now and please go get Math Masters page 125 if you haven't done so. Here are your answers once again, the work that we just completed. So, how many dimes are in a dollar? You should know there are 10 dimes in a dollar. So what fraction of a dollar is 1 dime? Well, if you have 1 out of 10, you'll have 1/10. How many pennies are in a dollar? We just reviewed this and you should know 100. So what fraction of a dollar is 1 penny? Well, if we're talking pennies and you have 1, you have 1 out of 100. So dimes are in the tenths place and pennies are in the hundredths place. Look at the grid. How many longs would it take for you to fill this entire grid? Remember, this is a long. A long is over at where all your other tools are at, and a long is 10 cubes in a row. It's long and thin. How many of those would it take to fill this entire grid? Well, if I only had 1 of those, I just covered 1/10 of the grid. Why 10 on the bottom? Because it would take 1 long. This would be the second long, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth, ninth, 10. It would take 10 longs to cover this entire grid. But if I only covered 1 of those, I covered 1/10 of it. How would I write 1/10 as a decimal? I would write it as This is the 10th spot. 1/10 in decimal form would be written 0.1. What if I was covering and using 3 longs to cover this grid? What fraction now is covered? Hopefully you're realizing that if I could used 3 of those and covered it, I now just covered 3/10 of the grid. How would I write that in decimal form? I would write it 0.3. And the same continues. If I would cover up 6 longs to cover up this grid, what fraction would I be covering up? 6 out of 10 longs would cover it. How would I write that as a decimal? 0.6 for 6/10. So write the fraction and equivalent decimal for this grid. I am now working on Math Journal, page 91. This time, if you notice, I don't have one full long. I have individual cubes. Each one of these cubes is 1. So I would need 100 of these to fill up this grid. So right now, the bottom part, the bottom number would be 100 because that's how many cubes this grid is broken into. How many of them are shaded? Well, I got to count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I just covered 8 out of 100 cubes. 8/100ths means the number 8 needs to be in the 100th spot when I write that as a decimal. So I would write that as 0.0. I don't have any tenths. 8 needs to be in the 100th spot. I want you to go ahead and finish Math Journal, page 91. Then I want you to bring it back to me, back at the back table, so that I can check it to make sure that you did number 2, number 3, 4, 5, 6 correctly, and it is an assessment check. So I need to make sure that you understand how to do these. Pause the recording now, finish that page, and then bring it back to me so I can check it. This is the page that you should have worked on and should have brought back and shown to me. The next thing that this is going to ask you is to turn to Math Journal, page 92. And the first math box is going to be working with you again on fractions of a grid as far as longs and cubes. So you're looking at, you don't need to do the fraction math sheet that was just shown there. This is page 92 in your Math Journal. Complete it, then bring it up to me so I can check it. Pause the recording now to do that page. This is what it looks like. Again, make sure you're pausing. And the final thing that you're going to do is Math Masters, page 129. If you haven't placed that in your math folder yet, please make sure that you get that. This is the final assessment piece for this lesson so that I know that you understand what you're doing. So try to do it alone. Again, I need to see it when you've completed it before you go on to the next lesson. Thank you.